Good morning. Well, Jesus gets down to this small olive grove called Gethsemane. And there the disciples settle down. They've had a busy day probably. They're feeling tired and they tend to go to sleep. And he withdraws just a short distance from them and he says to Peter and the other, one or two others, he says, "Will you pray with me for a while?" And then he goes a bit further and he prays. He knows what's coming. He knows what's coming. He knows what's coming and he is fearful of it. Why? Well, we don't really understand what is going to happen in the crucifixion. It wasn't just a physical death. It wasn't just a brain death. It was a spiritual death as well. He who had not been separated from God for the whole of eternity was going to experience death. I don't think it was the physical thing that Jesus worried about. It was this idea of being separated from the Father. You know, he goes right the way down until everything is cut off. And right to the very end, when there is nothing left, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Not that he knew what is happening, but he is now experiencing the thing that all of us human beings have to experience. He was experiencing the very act of death. We can't understand that, how God can experience that. He who is the source of life can't understand how he could experience it. But in the meantime, he's gone down into Gethsemane, into this olive grove. And suddenly Judas comes with armed soldiers. And Jesus sees them coming. He knows they're coming. He's waiting for them. And he goes forward to them. He says, "Who are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he says, "That's me. That's me. Now, if you want me, let all these others go." Now, Peter, who was in a few moments later going to deny him in the palace of Caiaphas and Annas, gets angry when he sees what's happening. I mean, Jesus had told him he was about to be arrested. But he gets angry and he draws a sword. He's underneath his belt. He draws a sword and he lashes at one of the high priest's servants, a man called Malchus. He cuts his ear off. And Jesus says, "Stop. If you defend yourself with the sword, you will die with the sword." Reaches out and heals this man. Now he says, "Take me and let the others go." An interesting story coming from Mark's gospel, because it is said that this young man had accompanied them when they went out to sleep in the Gethsemane. I expect he thought, I'm a man now, I can go with these others, I'm going to be with the men, And he'd gone out and he just had a sheet tied around him. He didn't have any other clothes on, he just put a sheet around him as he was sleeping. And suddenly the Romans reach out and grab him, and they grab hold of the sheet. And he just lets the sheet go and runs away naked. Goes back to his house. I expect he said, Mom, guess what's happened? Jesus has been arrested. And I'm outside the house and I'm completely naked. I haven't got anything to cover me." I think Mark put that into his gospel because he wanted to say quite simply, I was there. I was part of the group. I saw it happening. But as for Jesus, well, he's taken up those steps. If you go there, you can see the steps are still there. The steps that lead up to St. Peter's Galligante. Up those steps he went, the very same steps. I've stood on those steps. I looked up and I thought, he climbed these steps. He climbed these steps. This is where it actually happened. This was his view of the valley when he climbed the steps. And there he was brought to trial before Annas and Caiaphas. They try to find something wrong with him. They can't do it. They can't find it. They can't find any witnesses who will stand against him. See, they were depending upon Judas to be the witness. They'd arrested him, and they depended that Judas was going to stand up and proclaim the things he'd done and how he had broken the law. That's why Judas had handed him over. But something strange has happened, because Judas is now full of remorse. Now, many theologians like to say he repented. I don't know. But he certainly had remorse, so much remorse that he goes back into the palace of the high priest and he throws down the 30 pieces of silver that they'd given him for betraying Jesus. He said, I have betrayed innocent blood. And they say, what is that to us? We have him under arrest. Just go away. But of course, they can't use the money because it was blood money. It had been given to betray somebody. And so we are told that later, having gathered the money up, they use it to buy a small field where they were going to bury strangers in. People are coming up, you see, for Passover. And sometimes after a long journey, they get taken ill and they would die in Jerusalem. They had no family there, perhaps they had no friends there. Well, this was the common plot for burying people like that just outside of Jerusalem. And today you can go there and you can see exactly where that field is. But then he'd gone off and he'd suicided. I feel sorry for him. And yet, I don't understand him. I don't understand why he did it. But I feel great sorrow for him. Now, I have a feeling, just a feeling, and I have no way at all of proving it, that when Jesus finally dies on the cross, goes to paradise with the thief, because he says he'd be there on the first day with him. When Jesus goes into Hades, I've got a feeling the first person he looked up was Judas. But there's nothing to account for that. That's just me. Amen.